and mixed media artists Adjoa Burrowes and Gail Shaw-Clemons in a conversation moderated by artist Sheila Crider. Adjoa Burrowes is a mixed media artist and art educator. She earned a BFA in printmaking from Howard University and an MA in art education at the Corcoran's College of Arts and Design at George Washington University. She has studied with contemporary artists in Africa and has presented her work in the US Virgin Islands, Mexico, the Netherlands, and France. As an art educator, Burrowes has designed and implemented a series of art and writing workshops and residencies for cultural institutions throughout the nation. Her mixed media paintings, collages, paper sculptures, and hand-pulled prints have been exhibited throughout the United States and are represented in several collections, including the Banneker Douglas Museum, Pyramid Atlantic Art Center, Brooklyn Art Library, as well in cultural organizations in France and Belgium. She is the recent recipient of 2 fellowships, the Denbo Fellowship from Pyramid Atlantic and a fellowship from the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts. Gail Shaw-Clemons is a printmaker, mixed media artist, and an art activist. She was born in Washington, D.C., and received her BFA and master's degree from the University of Maryland, College Park, where she studied with Dr. David Driscoll, Martin Puryear, and Thaddeus Lipinski. She spent most of her career in New York City as an instructor at the United Nations International School. Shaw-Clemons has a studio at Stable Arts here in DC and prints at Pyramid Atlantic Art Center in Hyattsville, Maryland, and the Bob Blackburn Printmaking Studio in New York. She is exhibited extensively with many works included in public and private collections, both in the United States and internationally, including the Library of Congress, National Museum of Women in the Arts, Banneker Douglas Museum, and the David C. Driscoll Center at the University of Maryland. She is currently an adjunct professor at Bowie State University, and in August, she will undertake a residency at the Remark Printmaking Studio in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Our moderator, Sheila Crider, is an independent mid-career artist based in Washington, D.C. She has always made her living as an artist, working with paper, starting with handmade stationery at art fairs and craft markets. Encouraged by public response to her work, she began applying for exhibitions through open calls and eventually found her way into public art. Crider has received many grants, commissions, and awards, including individual artist fellowships in 2020 and 2017 from the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities. Her work is in a number of public and private collections, including Art in Public Places, G.W. Corcoran Gallery of Art, Evans Tibbs Collection, the State Department Print Collection, all in Washington, D.C., and in collections throughout the United States and internationally. So please join me in welcoming our 3 speakers today. Thank you.
I'd like to thank everyone for joining us, and thank you, Beverly, for that wonderful introduction. I think that today we'll start by having our artists tell us why they chose printmaking and what they hope to accomplish as a young artist choosing this medium. Gail?
Okay, well, I used to like to draw, but while I was at the University of Maryland, I stumbled into the printmaking department where they had all different types of techniques of printmaking available. And so I decided to take a course with Martin Puryear, a woodblock printing course. And it was very interesting because it was drawing, but taking it to another level. It was a combination of sculpture in terms of carving on the wood, and then being able to make a print and reproduce it was interesting for me. And so then I continued. I've been printing for 40 some odd years.
Mm-hmm. Adjoa?
Well, for me, my introduction to printmaking was pretty early as a young artist. I'm from Chicago, and I used to frequent the Southside Community Art Center, historic art center in Chicago. And at that venue, I was introduced to many printmakers, including Dr. Margaret Burrowes, who was quite a important figure historically in Chicago. Her woodcuts and other prints. Barbara Jones Hogu, who was a member of Afrocobra, a really important Black arts collective that started in Chicago. So I had that exposure early and I was fascinated by it. And printmaking to me held a lot of intrigue for me. The fact that it was, you could make multiples was very exciting, that many people could experience your art. So that was a draw. And then of course, my work at Howard University as a student and being mentored by Winston Kennedy. That was a very important moment for me. I attended Howard at its heyday. We had Elizabeth Catlett that came through the studio. I mean, it was an incredible experience. I took a class by James Wells. I mean, how better does that get as a young artist? It was just incredible.
Mm-hmm. Well, so how long have you and Gail worked together?
I think we met in the 1970s. We were actually a part of a group called Saba, and quite a few members were in there. I think Kabuya was in that group as well. Mm-hmm. And so it's been a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And we've done a lot of collaborative printing in different studios in different states.
Mm-hmm.
It's been great.
Yeah, and so I think that right now we have a video of you working at Pyramid Atlantic. Isn't that correct? We're going to look at that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, going to explain a little about your working process, right?
Right, and I also wanted to say that Sheila and I went to high school together, so we go way, way, way back as well.
Yeah, I meant to mention that.
Probably before we even knew we were artists at all.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a video we taped at Pyramid Atlantic, and I'd like to thank them for letting us use the space. So I am working on a large print. I'm doing one section of it. I'm just fitting everything together to see how it works. And so now I'm getting ready to roll up a rainbow roll, which is a two-part color that blends into a third color. And so I'm able to maximize my ability to create color. So I'm kind of softening up the ink, getting it ready to roll out on the brayer. And I'm adding it to, I start out with white, and then I add color to one side of it. And if I'm using two different colors, I'll put another color on the other side. But however, I always start with white. And then I start to roll and blend the colors. If I shift the brayer a little bit, it will start to blend and create a gradient. So I'm now printing on top of a stencil that I'm going to place onto the print that I was working on. So this print has had many, many layers of color and textures placed on it, getting it prepared to turn it into a three-dimensional piece of sculpture.
So how big are each of the sheets?
The sheets are 22 by 30.
And how big is the final piece going to be?
Final piece is going to be 30 inches tall and I guess about 15 inches wide. Okay, so I'm moving the sheets that I don't need right now and getting ready to crank it through the press. Putting a piece of newsprint on top first to protect the blanket, which hasn't been protected very much. But this is all communal space. So, so after cranking it through the press, I take the stencils off. Okay. And if there's too much ink on it, I will go back and take some newsprint and put it back into that area and just kind of pull off the amount of ink that I want, because I'm trying to play around with the balance of contrast. So here I'm taking off some of the color, as you can see on the newsprint. Okay, so this is the middle section. In the center is actually where the opening of the robe will be. It's a warrior robe. And so this is the template that well, a pattern that I made that I will eventually put on top of this. Once I glue those sheets together, I will put the template on top and cut around it. So it's basically like sewing, only I'm using paper.
And what is the significance of those symbols I'm seeing?
Those are Ndinkra symbols. They are from Ghana. They're actually philosophy, ancient philosophy. And the symbols kind of tell a story about how you're supposed to behave in society and how you're supposed to treat each other and the environment. And these are ancient. Some of them were actually found in tombs, in Egyptian tombs. So now I rolled out another color on plexiglass, and I'm taking a print that has been printed previously and printing on the back of it. So I have another series that I'm doing. These are kind of relief sculptures where I'm adding two prints on top of each other. One is rolled and shaped to look like a relief sculpture, and then glued to a background color.
Now these look smaller. What size are they?
These are 11 by 15. So I've made maybe about 50 of them so far. And I'm printing on both sides. 50% of them I print on both sides of the paper. And the paper that I use for the ground is actually only printed on one side. So it's been fun just playing around trying to get these shapes and actually trying to make them stay. And finding the right glues that will work. Yeah, so that's my piece.
Okay, so now we're going to see Adjoa in action.
Okay, I actually deconstruct my prints by cutting them up. And in the studio, I'm often working on a number of different prints at the same time, using different materials. Like in my hand, the piece with the pink, I'm printing from plastic, a plastic bag. I use a lot of stencils in my printing, these different shapes, organic shapes that are cut out of plastic that I place on top of the paper or on top of the plate. And these stencils serve as a mask to block out the ink. And here I am registering a print. Now I use Akua ink in a lot of my printing, and I like the Akua because it's water-based and non-toxic, which is really a direct opposite to my beginnings as a printmaker, where we're using oil-based inks and using all types of chemicals to get to clean up. So this is nice, not having to worry about that. Here I'm inking up using just a touch of white to soften the black. And printmaking really, it has held my interest for such a long time. And I think it's because it really activates a lot of my senses. The smell of the inks has an allure. There's the sound of the roller over the ink. And then there's that surprise that you get when you roll the paper through the press. And here I'm laying some of the stencils on top. And, you know, I'm working with layers also. Well, there's certain processes that you use that you really do need the press. But in other instances, I'm printing at home using a gelatin plate, which is very soft, and you can actually run a print by just touching your hand over the surface, which is kind of cool. But having a large press is really precious and rare. And I really love that. And I think there's also that physicality of working in printmaking. And the one thing I like about using those stencils is that you can print positively and negatively. And here I'm getting the negative result of the stencils. So all the area around my stencils I'm printing in this instance. And the other layers peeking through.
And then do you print the ink from the stencils?
Sometimes I print from the stencils themselves. So you get a positive result.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes I mask out areas with torn paper or tape.
Now it seems that some of your prints are very faint. Are you printing from the ghost?
Yes,
I use
I use the ghost a lot, but this is like the positive result of printing from the stencils.
Yeah.
And you get the layered effects, and there was like this ghosting underneath, and you get the ghosting from running paper several times. Mhm. And here, you know, I'm cutting out the print, and it's really interesting because it's starting to feel like I'm drawing, not with pencil though, but with scissors, and activating this print into this 3D space, which is exciting for me.
Mm-hmm. Can you explain what it means to print from the ghost?
Well, you're like, you know, if you have ink on your plate and you're printing with the full saturation of the ink, and then after that, you're running the paper a second time. And because some of the ink has landed on the paper, you only have a small amount of ink. So of course it's lighter and it's a little more nuanced. Mm-hmm.
Mm.
All right.
Okay. So we didn't see. Okay, I think that working in 3 dimensions is really important to both of you. And I like the direction that your work is going in. Maybe we can look at some images from you individually to see how that aesthetic developed in your work. Would you like to start, Adjoa?
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. All right, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, I started off, like I mentioned, traditionally, you know, doing woodcuts and etchings. But as my practice grew, I leaned more toward monotypes and monoprints because it allowed me more flexibility and a looseness, which I really craved. I think the beginnings of my work sculpturally started with this piece, and this was done like in 2009. And this was a monoprint. And what I ended up doing was incorporating boxes that I constructed out of other parts of the print. I would pierce the surface of the paper. I would add different materials, like in this instance, I had copper wire.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started this love affair with cardboard, which started like as a grad student at the Corcoran. And I was challenged to deconstruct these boxes and form something new. And in the process, you're giving it new meaning. And for me, cardboard is a really mundane and ordinary material, but there's just so much packed into what it means, the symbolism of it, the fact that cardboard is an ordinary material, but there's a lot of inherent meaning in it. And I was, really challenged to create these large scale pieces, like from single pieces of cardboard. Like this was on the left was a wardrobe box, and I would tear it and cut it and peel it. And it ended up being this 7-foot construction. And on the right, I started to combine similar boxes with a similar coloration, and these were Nike boxes, right? And all of these things kind of referenced mass consumption and material culture and waste in Western society. All the cutting and the tearing, very physical, again, like printmaking for me. So it was kind of a natural moving from the printmaking to the torn and cut cardboard constructions.
The way that you're using the scissors and the tearing is like you're drawing with those instruments, with your fingers and with the scissors.
It's really interesting. And the work to me referenced aspects of African American culture where, discarded objects are often remade into something new and beautiful. And African culture where like old objects are have an entirely new meaning and one of reverence and power. And then began to photograph these constructions. And they started to take on another level of complexity and meaning for me. The surface of the materials, the cardboard is, it has that beautiful brown tone, but when photographed, it starts to look metallic-like. And this cardboard construction here made from a floral box, and the beautiful browns and greens on the surface really kind of activated my creativity. And this was interesting too for me because for the first time here, I'm combining my prints with the cardboard and collaging areas or shapes from the prints onto the surface of the cardboard. And on the right, actually mounting the cardboard on wood and incorporating painting in the piece. This was a series of monotypes that referenced the honeybee and its endangered plight in the world. And here I'm aiming to draw attention to different current environmental concerns and then man's negative effect on the natural world. So again, using the stencils in a positive and negative way. And then sometimes I'll print with the stencil, I'll remove it, and then you end up with this line work around the stencil, which was exciting to me. More monotypes, prints that were collaged, layered. The right was a gelatin print, and when you rub the pigment off of the plate, you get some beautiful brush strokes.
Can you talk a little bit more about the gelatin plate and exactly what it is?
Well, the gelatin plate is very flexible and soft, and you're able to actually print by hand. You don't need a press. So that was like a real draw for me. And you can actually draw on top of it. You can roll ink on top of it. So there's a variety of ways that you can interact with it.
Where do you get it?
You can purchase it from any of the art supply stores, or you can make it. You can make it just like you're making Jell-O, only it doesn't have a taste. Well, you know what I mean? It's gelatin. It's just gelatin, and you're pouring it into a form. So if you want, it's really cool. Very cool. And these were some prints that I made from reclaimed plastic. I actually purchased cardboard one time, which I thought I would never do in my life. And I purchased the cardboard, but didn't like the cardboard at all, and ended up falling in love with the plastic wrapping that it came with. So I ended up printing the plastic wrapping. because you can get some very, very nuanced textures and tones from the plastic. So that was like really exciting for me. And these pieces kind of reclaimed, it kind of, I don't know, it gave you the feeling of this aerial photograph of cities, maybe burnt out cities or landscapes, maybe the result of a firestorm or urban violence. And then I got these beautiful little shapes around the plastic that were exciting to me. They looked like little insect legs scurrying over the cover. And all of these were like studies in color and texture and line and shape. And they were a part of a series called Undercurrents that kind of referenced the angst and uncertainty of contemporary life. These two. And, you know, I work really intuitively. I work on my pieces and I search for imagery or images that come out. You know, a lot of times there's these unexpected forms and shapes that come out. And a return to my cardboard constructions, I'm really interested in consumer packaging and what products we consume as a society and what that says about us as a nation. And incidentally, I mean, I worked as a package designer for many, many years. So it's almost like a full circle experience for me, you know, designing these packages in my past and now actually deconstructing them.
Have you ever had the opportunity to make work from a package that you designed?
You know, I haven't done that, but I'm excited about that. I would like to do that at some point.
Yes.
Yeah, how do you like me now?
Exactly.
Right. Some more cardboard constructions and working with cardboard that actually has coloration on the outside, because in the past it was just the naked cardboard. And it's interesting because in the early, my early work with the cardboard, I only worked with boxes from products that I actually consumed. So it was like, if you put all those pieces together, it kind of formed a snapshot of my consumer habits, which was really interesting. And then my growing interest in sculpture and creating these constructions from painted papers. This one was called Say It Loud, and this was made during the height of the pandemic and all of the violence and uproar and all of the social unrest of that period. I paint on plastic, I print on plastic, from plastic, a variety of different materials. And these pieces grew out of the unrest of the pandemic also. So, you know, I have the brush strokes and these series called Winds of Change 2020. These are small little pieces, but packed a punch for me. And finally, the result of some of the pieces that I showed you in the video. You have the prints mounted on cardboard and then cascading underneath it, almost in a dance. So that's kind of like where I'm heading with my work now. Mm-hmm. And my work is continuing to grow and evolve. And I continue to search for ways to push paper and my printmaking more and more into the 3D realm.
Mm-hmm. Great, Adjoa. That was really fascinating. There's a lot of interest in that gelatin print process, though. And, you know, there's interest in seeing demonstrations. So, Gail, what do you have for us?
Okay, yes, let me share my screen. Share. Okay, and okay. So I usually start off my presentation showing this Confederate dollar bill because 50 years ago, it took me 50 years to actually come across one of these bills. And it was a bit insulting because I never saw anything like this in the history books. So I suddenly realized it was my realization of being woke that I had to really start researching and finding my own history, finding out about my own history. Okay, so let's see, why can't I make this move? Can you see? Okay, yes. What happened? Okay, so I started creating, using found like objects, African objects and artifacts, and collaging US currency on them. And so I feel that these are truly African-American sculptures. And the reason I incorporated the money on the sculptures is because we have such a history with money in America in terms of slavery and how people became millionaires from this process. And even companies today are still benefiting in perpetuity from the slave trade. Okay, so this is it's kind of like an African artifact. They use gourds a lot in Africa for hauling water and as a cooking utensil. So I decided to elaborate it with shredded money as well, and also create a design inside. The shredded money was compliments from the Bureau of Engraving, not from my studio. Okay. Yes. And so and also I wanted to it's a gourd. And so after I created this, I found a song entitled Follow the Drinking Gourd. And it was about a song that had directions to the north for the Underground Railroad. So sometimes I was looking for history, and then sometimes history found me. Okay, continuing my research, I stumbled on this Ghanaian warrior robe, which had these leather pouches with prayers from the Quran within them. And I thought that that would be an interesting idea to try to recreate or do my own interpretation of the warrior robe. For me, the warrior robe represented protection, courage, and the warrior spirit that my ancestors had to have had in order to survive the atrocities of the transatlantic voyage as well as slavery.
Did you decide to use the Adinkra symbols to emulate the patches, the prayers and whatnot, for the meaning that they have?
Yeah, I didn't actually. Eventually I would like to go into that. What I did was I just really thought about a robe as clothing, and when you make clothing, you often use a pattern. So I thought this would be an easy way to construct it. So I made a template of how it would look flat, and did my prints. I used a lot of Adinkra symbols, and the crocodile is a reoccurrence in my work. It's symbolic of the resilience, where it breathes air, yet it lives in the water. So it has, it's an adaptable creature. And it also, it exists from the dinosaurs. So it's a prehistoric animal as well.
A real survivor.
Right, with no predators except each other if they get in a fight, let's say. So, so a lot of the designs and colors they represent the chaos and the energetic chaos of the unspoken atrocities that were forced upon my ancestors. So it's very busy, it's a lot going on, but the one thing that I enjoy about these pieces is that I took an ugly topic and transformed it into something beautiful, so that it can lure you in to a new conversation, a new information about my history. Okay, and this is the larger piece that I was working on in video. So I knew I had to finish it and get it standing before this presentation. So here it is. In the newer pieces, I'm actually going beyond the sleeves putting my figures and my symbols so that they protrude from the actual sleeve. Okay, and so as my research continued, I did a series of drawings of African mask. I always come back to the African mask because it's a constant reminder of my origin. I don't know where I'm from in Africa, but I know that I have a beginning. And so I have a small collection of African masks that I started to draw from. And when I ran out of those, I would go to the African Museum and actually draw in the museum by actual observation. So I created a series of these drawings, but because a lot of African sculptures were, let's say, stolen from Africa and then put into a lot of the museums, I felt an obligation to not just replicate the sculptures, but to kind of create, make them my own. So I decided to make them, since the mask represents the ancestral spirits, I wanted to make the drawings transparent. And so in order to do that, I started making lithographs of the drawings and then putting layers of gel medium on top, somewhere in between 15 or 20 layers. And once it dries, I would soak it in water and then with a scrub brush, scrub away the paper so that I had just the gel membrane with the image encased inside of it. That allowed me to put transparencies on top of each other. And I was able to create a lot of interesting and kind of haunting, mysterious imagery. It's like the spirit is stuck inside of the original drawing. Okay, and so let's see, I think I have one more to show you here. So they're kind of ghostly. It's like, you know, they're pulling you into the image. So once COVID hit, I was kind of stuck at home and decided to draw on my dining room table. I looked at the news day and night, and it was overwhelming. And so I started to understand, and well, COVID actually, the mask became very important at that time because everyone wound up having to wear a mask. So, and COVID also revealed the disparities in marginal communities. And so I started drawing these life-size Black bodies without heads, with the intent to superimpose my mask onto their bodies. So here are some of the examples. And within the image, I would try to show some of the inequities that unfortunately affected our Black and Brown communities. And so the one on the left, I'm listing poisoning, toxic water, low income, poor health. All of these things contributed to our demise. And on the right, there was the Black Lives Matters march and the killings of people just minding their own business and trying to live a normal life. So after 2020, I had to 2020, I had to leave. I had to go and start working into color again. Colors, it's loud, it's quiet, it can soothe your soul. And I just kind of made a desperate way back to working with just pure color. And this escape into color became my solace. And I began to turn inward and tune out the news and the ills of society while working in the studio. So it was very therapeutic. So my use of color was created with spontaneity and chance. And I was always trying to each day create a color that I'd never seen before. The organic shapes are positioned to suggest movement and while also being frozen in time. Okay, so the warrior robe gave me permission to push the boundaries of my printmaking as sculpture. And I love everything about printing. I love the printmaking process. Again, like Adjoa mentioned, the smell of the ink, the sound of the brayer rolling over the glass, all of those things, and the physicality of it, where, you know, after you print in the studio, you definitely need to take a nap. So I really enjoy all of those aspects of it. And hopefully, as long as I can stay physically strong, because you do need some strength to continue printing until I don't know when. So, but working sculpturally reminds me of my childhood, because when I was young, I used to take typing paper and just regular tape and build these constructions. I remember building a camera and pretending that I was a photographer. So it was very intriguing to actually construct something and that you can hold in your hand and look at different viewpoints. And so, I've always considered myself a frustrated sculptor, but it was always prohibitive to work with sculpture because of the size of it and the materials. And so I guess now I've pretty much gone back to my childhood with working with paper and sculpture.
Well, that was great, Gail. So what do you think you have, what do you think the future holds for you both? I'd like to know what your future projects are going to be, and where you think you want to take your work now. Stop sharing.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Stop sharing, that would help. Okay, so let's see. Well, right now, I'm really not interested in editions in terms of me doing editions, but I am having an edition made of some of my masks. And but I want to continue working three-dimensionally with color. I've started working larger with these colors, relief pieces. I'm now working 18 by 24. And so that's, I want to try to continue that for a while and see where it takes me.
Mm-hmm. Adjoa?
Well, yeah, I'd love to just continue working with the prints and deconstructing them and just seeing where I can go with that, and making perhaps more large scale pieces with the cutout constructions, and possibly exploring animating them, because I see movement in it. When I look at some of the pieces cascading from under the mounted print, I feel like they're begging to go somewhere else, you know, to play on the surface, you know. And I just would like to try to activate that movement and just see where I go with that, where that would take me.
Do you guys have plans to collaborate anytime soon?
Well, we've already been collaborating on another project, a book project that started 9 months ago.
Right.
And actually we're kind of coming to the end of that. There are 9 artists in the collective and 9 resulting artist books. And I did a lot of printing for the pages that I did in the other people's books, the other artist books. And maybe there's some other collaborations in the future. I don't know.
Gail, do you have any thoughts before we open it up for questions?
Well, we are actually, with that book project, we actually have a couple of exhibitions coming up as well. So that might lend itself to some more collaboration. However, that would be interesting. It's kind of like the exquisite corpse. You know, you do one part of the print, I do the other. It would be interesting to play around
I would
with.
like to see that.
Yeah, because Adjoa and I are the only 2 people who will print on their birthday.
Well, I don't know. I think that would be the kind of pleasurable thing that I reserve my birthday for.
Yeah.
You know, so maybe we can take a few questions from the audience if there are any. I don't know. Beverly?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you so much for that fabulous presentation. You have given me a renewed appreciation and understanding of the intricacies and the creativity of printmaking and the use of scissors and tearing in cardboard. I never, it's amazing to me how you do it. And Adjoa, I want to hear more how you physically can do that. I find that just incredible. But we have several questions. In addition to all the accolades, of which there are so many. Juliet would like to know where to source the soft gelatin plate that you mentioned, Adjoa. Where
Well,
do you get
you
it?
can go to Dick Flick Plaza Art. It's readily available.
Okay, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Christine would love to see a plate demonstration, a gelatin's plate demonstration someday.
Yeah.
Go on YouTube and watch them.
Pardon me? Oh,
You can, it's Gloria, I'm sorry.
yeah.
You can go on YouTube and
Oh, okay.
demonstrations on how to do jelly prints.
Okay.
Actually, Pyramid Atlantic had, they do workshops occasionally at Pyramid Atlanta, gelatin plate printing.
So Dina would like to know, can you please talk a bit more about drawing on paper and using gel in between, scrubbing away to remove the paper and having just the drawing on the gel?
Okay, yes. Well, it's kind of like magic because I don't know why the ink attaches itself to the gel. That is something I can't quite comprehend, but it happens. And so after that, you can do anything to the back of the paper, and the whole paper, I have pulp at the end. There's nothing left on the back of the paper, but you can see the image through it. So I don't know what that chemistry is, but it works. And if you put enough layers of gel medium on it, you can scrub with a nail brush. I've even used a brush that you would clean your tub with, because on larger pieces. And the gel is strong enough, it won't tear or anything. It will just take away the paper, and you'll have this kind of transparent film.
Very good. Well, I think my husband, Chris, who is not on the chat, has some questions. So I'm going to let him ask them.
Well, my perennial question to artists, and I ask it because I'm totally fascinated by it, and that is where you get your creative ideas. I mean, where does all this wonderful, great creativity, where does all of it come from to both of you?
I think that printmaking has such flexibility that you can almost do anything with it. I mean, it could look like a painting. It could look like you can do sculpture. It just has a vast amount of possibilities. As far as inspiration for me is, when I think it's more what I experience and what hits me, and just pure experimenting. That's pretty much it. You're really doing the work for yourself. I mean, if you're doing it for other people, then that defeats the purpose. So it's a very personal experience.
Yeah, I would agree. It's very personal. And, it's a process where, for me, it's a lot of experimentation too, and trying to push the medium and trying to do something that is slightly outside of the box, literally outside of the box. And also a response to what's happening socially, what's happening environmentally. It's a lot of factors,
But it's also, it kind of holds your sanity, I find, because I even though I couldn't go out of the studio during the pandemic, I just had to do something, and it just distracted me from all that was going on. You could take time out to be distracted, and then time moves on.
Mm-hmm. And I felt really fortunate because I do work outside of the home. I have a home studio, but with working a lot outside of the home. During the pandemic, I had to work virtually. So I was in my studio, and I was really, really fortunate to be able to do the volume of work that I did in this past year. It was like mind-boggling, but I felt like a little ever-ready bunny. I was printing constantly, you know, day and night. And like I'm on Instagram, and then I would often post and say, well, this is from the Midnight Studio, because it was like nonstop up into the wee hours of the night.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to pest you with some more questions, if I may.
Sure.
What is the role of accidents in both of your work?
It's extremely necessary, actually. I don't think you can grow at all without an accident. I mean, the first time I did a large gel medium, I put on 30 coats, and the accident was that I had to do it over again because 30 coats gave it a frosted appearance. It was no longer transparent. So I had to cut it down, and that was a learning experience for me.
Mhm. Well, yeah, experimentation is definitely a part of my practice, and you welcome it because it helps you, like Gail said, to grow and to move to the next level. And it's constant, it's constant, it's constant. And it's like we work because we have to. It's like you do what your soul requires. Somebody said that one time to me, but it's true. It's like you do what your soul requires.
And then I wanted to ask Adjoa, when you cut and tear into the cardboard, is it planned or just random?
Yeah, it's well, I have a general idea of where I want the piece to go, but there's a lot of randomness, and that's just a part of the way I work. I welcome that, and it's kind of a direct opposite to the way I used to work. I used to work very tightly. My etchings were excruciatingly detailed. I used to do these really large etchings, cross-hatched, and then at some point, at some point, I decided to just kind of step out and be a little bit more intuitive, and it works for me now.
Yeah.
It probably wouldn't have worked for me 30 years ago, but it works for me now.
And a follow-up. When do you know that it's complete, that you stop tearing and cutting?
That's interesting, because a lot of times I don't know. A lot of times I don't know, but you work until it feels right. And you stop until, you stop when it feels like you've reached that.
And then I wanted to ask Gail, I was fascinated by the rolled pieces of paper for two reasons. One, do you print the colors, multiple colors on one sheet before you bend and turn it? Or is it some sort of reflection of light that shines off of the image?
No, I usually print on both sides of the paper. Like one day I'll go into the studio and I'll find a color that I want, a gradient, a gradual transition of maybe blue to purple or something. And then I print maybe 5 to 10 with that color. And then the next day I will print, once those are dry, I will print on the opposite side, and just mixing it up so that they all get a different color behind them. And so then when I fold them and roll them, I get two different experiences, the color on the front and the color on the back. And so they're always kind of nice surprises, because sometimes the roll doesn't hit where you think it might hit, and one color might get completely covered, and while another color is being exposed. So it's kind of by chance that the colors kind of evolve, but guaranteed, if I have at least 3 tones on one sheet of paper, I'm going to get a nice mixture of colors.
Well, it looks like you're doing sort of James Turrell work on pieces of paper with, it looks like wonderful light reflections, and I think they're absolutely fabulous.
Yes.
Thank you.
All of you. We do have a few more questions in the chat box, and Ann Greer asks, where and when will the artist book exhibitions be?
There's one coming up at the Pyramid Atlantic And I think that's in July, mid-July.
I think
And
so.
the second one is going to be in New York at the Bob Blackburn Studio Gallery.
Okay.
That I think that opens in October.
And Aziza Claudia Gibson Hunter asks, what role does research play in your work?
In my work?
Yes, in both your work.
Oh, in both. Okay. For me, the research became a pivotal point, like maybe 20 years ago. It was like, no, I have a purpose and I can't get rid of it. I can't stop thinking about how are we on money and we've been totally omitted from history. How does that happen? It's very purposeful to create money. You have to engrave a plate and print it. And that seemed a lot harder than writing something in a book. So my passion it was awakened, and that research just kept leading me to other things. And again, then things would start to come to me. So once you're on a path, things start to happen, and it's like a snowball at the top of the hill and rolling down the hill. It just kind of collects. Yeah.
Yeah, and research, is a big part of being an artist, even though, the general public generally doesn't see that, but artists go through great lengths sometimes to get to the bottom of like what they're creating. I mean, it can be as simple as researching the materials and the longevity of materials too. Like if you hone in on a specific topic, finding out everything that you can about that thing. When I started exploring cardboard, I started exploring what objects meant in cultures, in Africa, in Western cultures, and what that means. When I did that Ancient Queens series, I was interested in issues of the environment and the honeybee, and finding out that the honeybee it appears as a symbol in many cultures. So it's like going down a rabbit hole though, because it's endless. It's endless. So artists, I see myself as an artist, a researcher, an educator. It's all wound up into like our bodies.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah.
Well, thank you. That's wonderful. I think we're probably run out of time, and I just want to thank you so much for doing this. This is fabulous. One of the best talks we've had for the Washington Print Club.
Mm.
Lovely. And Nancy, would you like to just say a few words before we sign off?
Thank you, Beverly. I thought that was a wonderful conversation. Thank you all. And from the chat, I think my experience was the experience of everyone here today. So thank you to Gail, to Adjoa, to Sheila, and thank you to everyone who joined us today. We hope to see you again for future Washington Print Club programs.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. And goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yes.
Very welcome. Our pleasure.
Bye, everybody. Have
Bye.
a wonderful weekend.
Too.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.